Hey everyone, J-Funk here, and today I want to talk to you about Windwalker Monk in Horrific Visions, specifically the Horrific Vision of Stormwind, which I recently completed. First of all, I'm going to mount up at the start of this and then run to the corrupted area that I want to go to first. In this case, it'll be the Trade District. And you'll notice here that I try to LOS these mobs around a corner in order to group them up more effectively to kill them. What you'll see though is that for some reason the mobs like glitch into the wall and then they reset. It's unfortunate, but it happens. But first and foremost, I want to talk about essences. It's probably the most common question that I see around for Windwalker Monk Visions. And I think to answer that question for major essences, it really depends on what you're trying to prioritize in Visions. If you're trying to prioritize survivability, I'd recommend running the Conflict and Strife Major for Reverse Arm. If you're in a group or if you're trying to prioritize AoE damage more, then I'd recommend the Blood of the Enemy or the Iris Major. That can be quite strong. For miners, I think the Purification Protocol miner is very good. The Breath of the Dying miner is very strong. And for the third miner, I'm not really quite sure. I'm still experimenting myself. I think the Vision of Perfection miner might have some potential for extra self-healing, extra verse, and more Stormwind and Fire charges over the course of the Vision. In this one I tried out the Unbound Force miner. Didn't really like it as much, but I'll keep experimenting and then I'll let you guys know what I like the most. But getting back into this vision here, we're gonna have to defeat the Inquisitor, and then after the Inquisitor dies, we're gonna have to defeat the Slave Master. Then after he dies, we're gonna have to rescue these people in these cages. And because we're going to defeat the Slave Master, the last boss, Illyria, is going to get his chain dragging ability here that you'll see in a moment, which is pretty easy to avoid, but you'll see I mess up because I don't know how the mechanic works. But going back to the setup, for talents, it's a pretty standard setup for Windwalker Monk. It's Chi Burst for AoE, extra Chi, extra healing, extra damage, Tiger's Lust, Ascension. I'm running Ascension because I'm running Reverse Arm. Usually you run those two together. Ring of Peace, but you can kind of run any talent in that row for Visions, I think. Like a Ring of Peace is good and what I prefer, but you can also run Good Karma if you want more survivability in Visions. That can be good. And then I run Diffuse Magic in case you get affected by a magical debuff that you can dispel with it. It can be pretty nice. If that isn't going to be the case, you could run Dampen Harm instead to mitigate more physical damage. And then hit combo, but you could also run Zwen because there is a bug in Visions specifically which causes pets to do more damage than they normally would be doing, which affects Stormwind and Fire as well. That's where I noticed it. I was doing a group vision with my guildies, and my Stormwind and Fire Rising Sun kicks and AoE abilities were doing more damage, or like the same amount of damage that mine were doing, even when I wasn't in Stormwind and Fire, which is just pretty insane. I had moments where I was doing 100k single target DPS with just Stormwind and Fire up, and that's it. This might affect Zwen as well. It might, or it might already be fixed. As of recording this video, I believe it still works, but it could be fixed. But if not, if it isn't fixed, then maybe running Zwen could be an option as well. Then for the last talent would be Whirling Dragon Punch. This is pretty standard. For trinkets, I run you can run any trinkets for AoE, like whatever AoE trinkets that you prefer. I'm using one tank trinket, the Absorb trinket from Opulence, just because I prefer to be a little bit tankier in these visions, because Windwalker is a bit of a squishy class, and I'm trying not to die in these. But for my other trinket, I'm using the Writhing Segment of Drestigath. I don't know if I would recommend using this trinket, but I wanted to try it out because I just got it from the raid that released this week. And it seems to be okay, but not amazing. The one thing about the Writhing Segment that it isn't mentioned is that the damage that it does is split amongst targets it hits, so it isn't as insane as an AoE trinket as it looks like. But back to the vision here, we're going to use the portal to go back to the Cathedral District, and then we're going to head all the way over to our second corrupted area that we're going to be finishing, which is the Dwarven District. Now for the Dwarven District, you have to first defeat the enemies outside on the left here to help free the gnome that's being attacked by her friends. She's being mugged, I believe. You have to slay them and prevent the mugging, and then after you prevent her from being mugged, you head into the zone here, and you'll have to place 8 explosives around the Dwarven District. And once you place those, after you place those 8 explosives, you will have to defeat an enemy. But in terms of what to watch out here for casts, you'll see that the mob that I just defeated casts something called Psychic Scream. It is a close-ranged fear, similar to what Shadow Priests have. And if the cast finishes, you get feared for a ton of time, and it can be pretty bad. Also, for this Repel cast, you can interrupt. You can't interrupt it, but you can like crowd control the footmen to stop it. It prevents a lot of damage from being done. Additionally, these archers will cast a frontal arrow attack. You just have to move out of where they're facing, and you'll want to take damage from it. And the Forge Breath, the weaponsmiths, I believe, cast Forge Breath. You just have to watch out where they're facing with that as well. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pre-place one of these sanity orbs, and then I'm going to speed pot and pull all of the mobs into the sanity orb so I can fight them while regaining sanity. It's in a technique that I'm experimenting with to see if it's any good or not. This is probably more useful in a group, but I want to try it here. And also, it would be probably more useful if I use it when I was at lower sanity, but I wanted to play it safe because I did fail the vision before this one. So all the mobs get clumped up. I used leg sweep. Unfortunately, one of the mobs that I pulled could not be crowd controlled by leg sweep, and then he also does an AoE stomp ability. So it didn't really work out for me in this one, but I do think that potentially for some areas this could be pretty useful. But we have to finish placing all these explosives here, and then after we finish that, we're going to be slaying this enemy. Now this enemy, his special thing that the boss will take from him is that he'll cast an ability where he'll place bombs on the ground that just have this big AoE and a timer. Just make sure that you aren't standing in that area when the explosives are about to go off, and you won't take damage. It's pretty easy to avoid. Yeah, we are affected by Madness Scorch Feet as we are in the last corrupted zone. And what this does is it periodically, every like 5 seconds or so, will give you a debuff, and then after a few seconds of that debuff, it will force you to jump in whatever direction you are facing, and it will leave a void zone beneath you. You'll see there I used Whirling Dragon Punch to prevent the knockback. You can't do this every time, and I wouldn't even recommend it. I'd recommend just when you get a sense of like when it's going to launch you, which I imagine there'll probably be a weak aura, but I was just doing it by feel. You can just face it a good direction that you want to move. I'd imagine this is probably more easy to deal with as a melee than a caster, but yeah, you can blink and stuff to prevent these knockbacks from happening. This is the enemy we have to face. Therum Deforge. He's going to drop explosives on the ground we have to move out of, and he's going to cast like a frontal conal breath attack. He's pretty easy to deal with. Just don't get hit by the Forge Breath like I do here. He, as I see here, he isn't able to be knocked back. I try to use Ring of Peace to knock him out of that so I can do more damage to him, but it doesn't work. We're going to take care of him here. I couldn't find the portal, which would take me back to the Cathedral District, so I ended up just mounting and walking back there, which doesn't take too long. And from this point on, we're just going to go directly to the last boss, Illyria, and we're going to take her out. Because I don't really have that many more orbs left, and I don't really want to risk going into one of these lost zones, which is pretty difficult, especially because I'm not really that experienced with dealing with these lost zones quite yet, and I don't know all the things that they can do to me, so I'm gonna just slow it down and just play it safe, make sure I get my 2 torn pages here and the extra boss chest. Now for these fallen Riftwalkers that are guarding Illyria here, they'll cast a couple abilities. One is a teleport behind you, within a follow-up telegraphed ability, and then the other one is called Shadow Ship, which is an interruptible cast where if they get it off, they'll give them a damage taken reduced buff for quite a long time. Now you can purge this with Arcane Torrent or with any purge abilities that you have. Additionally, you can interrupt it or crowd control them when they're about to cast it, which will prevent the cast from being off and they don't recast it. But we quite easily take care of them there. And then before we head into Illyria, we're going to drop a Sanity Orb real quick and top off, and then head into Illyria. So we're going to do our standard opener here. I'm going to do TOD, SCF, pop all our coolies, and just go in. Illyria will cast this Darkened Sky ability here. After a short time, she'll leave a bunch of void zones on the ground, just move out of them. She cast the bombs from the Dwarven District earlier, and then she's going to follow up with the Chains of Servitude from the Trade District guy. You can just... for the Chains of Servitude, it's actually pretty easy to deal with in this zone. you can just hide behind one of these pillars. And you'll notice there that I placed a Transcendence behind one of these pillars. That'll be useful later on in this fight. We're going to continue dodging Darkened Sky, and then the Chains of Servitude. We just hide behind one of these pillars like this, and then she'll just drag us into the pillar, which negates the ability entirely. And then more Darkened Sky, and then she's going to cast her AoE thing. Now, this is where the Transcendence that we placed earlier will come into great effect. We're going to stay as for as long as we can DPSing her. Then last second, we're going to TP behind one of these pillars with Transcendence, and then be fine. And then we're going to do more damage to her. She's standing in some void zones or some fire, pretty bad. Not a big deal. We take care of her pretty handily. This has been the Horrific Vision of Stormwind, led by Windwalker. If you have any questions or anything, make sure to leave a comment down below. Because of the YouTube algorithm, make sure to like. It helps me out a lot. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.